Welcome to the TechXLR8 TV studio, where I am joined on the sofa here by Bill Rue, who is the Chief Digital Officer of GE, or because you like job titles, let's call you the Chief Executive Officer of GE Digital. Bill, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, David, for allowing me to do this. It's a real pleasure.
Now, we've just grabbed you off of the keynote stage here, and unfortunately, because I've been in here interviewing some amazing people throughout the day, I wasn't able to watch your keynote presentation. And for anyone else who was unable to catch it as well, perhaps just give us a highlights package, if you will, of what you do at GE and the key points from your keynote.
Let me start with the keynote, because I think it really talks about the industry. And what I'm trying to get people to understand is most of the, the last 20 years is all about the consumer internet. Retail's changed, media's changed, telecommunications has changed. We know that. But the next generation is really going to be about the digitization of the industrial world. And we think that that's actually going to be bigger and more profound than what's happened in the consumer side. And it's a ton harder. So I was really talking about that market developing, what it looks like, the economic windfall that for the winners is going to be there, and how it's going to change everything from automotive, food and beverage, manufacturing, to how we produce and distribute electricity. And in the next 10 years, we're going to go on a journey that was like we started in '97 on the consumer internet side.
So you talk about how IoT-ifying stuff is going to be more difficult in the enterprise, in the industrial space, than on the consumer space. Why do you say that?
Yeah, because, well, it's just a ton harder. And let's talk about what that really means. I want you to think about this. When you drop a cell phone call, you get angry, you might power your phone down. When a person loses electricity in their house, there's a visceral reaction that is totally different. It's very difficult to live without electricity, clean water. It's very difficult without health care, great transportation. If these things don't work at a certain level, that's way above the inconsistency we will see in the consumer side, it will be unacceptable to people. So the technology has to work just at a different level, and it has to work at a real-time level that doesn't exist really in the consumer side.
The stakes are that much higher, particularly when you're talking about key critical infrastructure, than, like you say, a cell phone call being dropped.
And the World Economic Forum put out a report in 2016 that said the opportunity in the next 10 years is $6.8 trillion. So it's a hard problem, but it's one that's worth going after.
So, among the conversations that we've been having in the studio here today, I was chatting with somebody earlier on who, among her company's roles, the shipping industry is a big part for her. And, you know, we've this analogy that large organizations are a bit like oil tankers, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they find it very, very slow to turn around, to change course. Now, when you're talking about introducing industrial IoT into large organizations, to what extent do you find that holds true, that actually changing course, even digitally, can be a bit of a struggle?
Yeah. Well, I think it is a bit of a struggle. But take someone like GE. We were really the first mover in this industrial Internet of Things. And I came on in 2011. My role as Chief Digital Officer is really to help the company think about what kind of talent we need. How do we organize our businesses? So how do you take a traditional physical business and add digital on top of it, which is very hard, and we've been able to do that over the last 7 years. Then you take the other side of mine is I'm the CEO of GE Digital. In this case, I'm creating new products for new markets in industrial to take these things out. And I think that model is the model we're going to see in industrials. They're going to have to figure out how to do it for themselves, and then they're going to have to figure out how to create new products to go out in the market. Now, the thing is that, as I mentioned before, this is very hard. So, you know, the average person knows a lot about shopping, so they can go into retail. The average person doesn't know a lot about how the electrical grid system works. So if you're going to build these products, you really need deep domain knowledge, and that is hard to come by. So in the end, to connect the machines, let's say in a power plant, or take an offshore oil rig, where an offshore oil rig will connect 600 key machines that all function to pull oil off the bottom of the ocean, and we will pull the data in real time, we'll manage that data, we'll do machine learning and AI on that, that's going to let you understand what's going to break before it breaks. It's going to let you know where the most inefficient things are happening, and then it's going to guide people to go do those jobs in a more efficient way. Now that's a little different than creating, some sort of shopping system. And I'd add one last thing. When you use AI in retail, if it makes a mistake and it tells you to buy something you don't want to buy, the risk is zero. But if you're told to fix something that doesn't need to be fixed, it's expensive. And if you're not told to fix something that does need to be fixed, that's really expensive. And so the stakes are just so much higher on the industrial side. And so that's why I'd say businesses aren't moving slower, because the problem's just much harder. But the fact is that they can move faster than startups because they don't have the domain data and they don't have the domain knowledge. And that's what it takes to compete in this world.
Here at TechXLR8, there are a number of different events, 8 different shows under one roof here, and for me the real value of that is the collaboration between the different technologies, whether it's 5G, artificial intelligence, machine learning and so on. When it comes to industrial IoT, which technologies do you see being pivotal, critical to broader adoption and broader success with industrial IoT projects?
Yeah, I see 3 things are going to be at the center point of creating your digital industrial strategy. The first is pulling data off of these machines in real time. And, we're processing, hundreds of terabytes a day for our customers, the machine data. We're moving to petabytes a day. So first of all, you've got to be able to structure that, not just as a bunch of piles of data, but how do you create a real asset record? How do you associate this piece of data with this jet aircraft engine, with this part, and so you have a complete history, because that's how you're actually going to change the game. The second thing you need is algorithms that are reliability management, predictive maintenance, algorithms and machine learning on top of that will be able to determine as you send a pig through a pipeline, that's the sensor base, and it collects data on corrosion. How do you know that the corrosion you're reading needs to be fixed today, tomorrow, or a year from now? That kind of machine learning analytics has to be done, and we call that asset performance management. The last thing is you've got to tie this to people. We hear so much about people going away from jobs, and there are some jobs that are going to be lost, no doubt. But the fact is people are not going away. But the thing that's changing is for the last 100 years, people have told machines what to do. The scary thing is, and the one that people struggle with, is now machines are going to tell people what to do, not as their boss, but if you think about that, what that really means is the data and those analytics will say, hey, something needs to be done, and you got to do it. And what we have to train people to do is to believe what's coming off and act on that, because that's how they're going to drive productivity and efficiency. That's how we're going to make these systems safer. That's how we're going to make sure the electricity never goes down. That is what is going to happen, and we call that service automation. So the sort of the holy trinity is you need asset models to manage the data, you need analytics for those machines, and then you need the ability to automate the services. You bring that together, that is game-changing for our world.
The role of the human in there, particularly any conversation around AI and what happens to the workers, the Industrial Revolution, we've been through different industrial revolutions over the years, and each time there's been, from what I understand, and my reading of history, a similar level of fear. You go all the way back to the first Industrial Revolution, and there are a lot of people who are very, very scared of machines and went out to destroy them. Similarly, would you say with the fourth Industrial Revolution, it's, there's just going to be different jobs, people who are interacting side by side with the machines rather than being replaced by them?
It's a great question. I'm going to tell you first the bad news, and then I'll tell you the good news. Okay. So the bad news is this. The fact is that we're moving to an industrial world where everything's autonomous, not just cars. So we're going to get rid of the word automation, because that's the old way, and it really wasn't as autonomous as we see that we're going to get to. The autonomous car is the canary in the coal mine, because everything's going to be autonomous. Power plants, the electrical grid, how we do manufacturing, that is certainly going to change jobs. And you can see it in the car industry, what's happening. The people who develop the best autonomous software are probably the people who are going to sell the most cars. And then, but you know what happens is drivers go away, and that is going to hurt a certain class of jobs. But that's going to take about 10 years, 20 years to get through. The only thing, so we will see autonomous systems are going to be the center point of value in the industrial world, and jobs will go away. On the other hand, and this is what,
this is the good news now,
This
right?
is the good news.
Thanks.
I think if you take a picture of, Times Square in the early 1900s, before cars were really prevalent, you saw a lot of horses. And guess what? The number of jobs around horses, driving horses, cleaning up after horses, feeding horses, boarding horses, there was a ton of these jobs in 1900. When you look out 20 years later, those jobs all disappeared. The automobile came out and it just displaced those cars. What is going to happen though is we will have more, we still are going to have people, they're just going to be doing different kinds of jobs. And now one could say maybe we will need less of those people, but I think that we got to be careful because these things may open up other opportunities that didn't exist. And we've seen this over and over and over again where when a decline occurs, we didn't see all those people out of jobs forever. We saw that the automobile opened up new opportunities. And I think that when you get to autonomous, it's going to open up new opportunities for new kinds of jobs and new kinds of businesses that we don't imagine. And nobody knows what they are, so there's a fear. But every time this has happened, we've always managed to see a boom, not a bust. And I really believe that's what we're going to see here.
So coming back to today a little bit more in terms of organizations that are looking to implement industrial IoT, the pilot phase is often the end phase for many implementations. What would your advice be to anyone who's watching who is thinking about implementing a pilot when it comes to IoT, and how do they take it past that pilot phase?
Actually what we guide our customers to is a totally different approach. And I talked about this as well in my keynote. And that is that this is not a technology buy. If you go to a pilot, you're probably going to do a technology implementation and you're going to be very disappointed. We see that in AI. If I go to an audience and say, how many people are piloting AI? All the hands go up. If you ask how many have gone to production, all the hands go down. And it's because it turns into a technology play. What we guide our customers is tell us the outcomes that are going to have the biggest result for you. And it's usually things like, I don't want any downtime on my manufacturing line. So now that sounds impossible, but if you work back from that, you can say, okay, what information, what analytics do I need to get rid of the downtime, and then what do I change in the process? When you start with that business outcome in industrial and work your way back, you focus on getting to the technology and the information that you need rather than a field of dreams. I'll build it and figure out what I need. And I think that's the problem with pilots. So we always say, start with an outcome, and then let's go ahead and implement it in a controlled phase, just like Silicon Valley does. Build a minimally viable product. Let's start that. Now you could call that a pilot, but we don't. We think of it as a minimally viable product. Now let's take that minimally viable product. Let's see what kind of productivity we get. And if we get that kind of productivity we think, then let's talk about how you scale it out. And I think the idea of starting with a business outcome that could change your game, that always changes the nature of what you've got to do. The problem, and why people don't do this, is they often say, well, boy, I can't get 5% more energy out of my wind farm, because it sounds like magic. But the fact is, when you challenge them with the tools we have today, that's when magic occurs.
It's the same time and time again in any technology conversation, whether it's big data, whether it's AI, whether it's IoT. Don't start with the technology. Start with the problem that you're trying to solve. Start with some real concrete requirements almost.
And be bold on the outcomes.
Listen, final two questions. The first of which is the next 5 years for industrial IoT. Where do you see it going? What's going to be next? What should people be looking out for in terms of technology, in terms of outcomes, in terms of what will change?
I would say, look, cloud's going to be important, no doubt. But here's the interesting thing, and I think nobody recognizes this. We're going to see 70 to 80% of the processing is going to be at the edge, meaning we're going to put data centers eventually right next to these machines, right in these power plants, right in an oil field, right in the fleet. And so we're going to see a resurgence, if you will, of edge compute. The thing is, we need the cloud because we got to control the edge. If I've got 1 million elevators out there with 1 million edge compute devices, how do I keep them updated and so on? So we're going to see a new architecture, and the edge compute is going to be a key. The second thing we're going to see is this idea of, in the same way we have where ERP, the financial records at the center of the universe, at the same time in CRM, the customer records at the center of the universe, these systems are going to put the asset record at the center of the universe. So people need to think about creating this asset record oriented platform, and then at the same time drive outcomes and think about how you put the compute at the edge. Why? Because it's not pulling the data out that matters. It's deciding what to do and either telling a person to do something different or a machine to do something different.
Do you know, every analyst, depending on the day of the week, has got their own view on how many billions of devices will be connected to the internet by 2020, 2022. But one thing is for sure, that's going to need a lot of asset management, a lot of systems management to make sure that all of these systems are connected, their health is being monitored, and, you know, particularly if there's a lot of compute down there as well, that they're doing what they should be doing. It's really interesting insight. Again, you're right. I think that may have escaped an awful lot of people. My final question, because we're almost out of time, Bill, is this event this week, the TechXLR8 London Tech Week. It's been terrific to have you here speaking on the main stage here. What have you made of it? How important do you find events like this for cities like London, where there is a really rich startup culture as well as presence from established brands?
Look, I think this is a place. First of all, the idea of centering it around the city is so important, because what it does is it starts to become a place where people come to learn, they network, they start to think about new things, startups happen, traditional technologies hook up with startups, and it creates a community that is both local and global in nature. I love that part. The second thing is just the agenda that's been put together, the talks, they're fantastic. They touch a variety of topics, everything from industrial to Wikipedia. And so you look at that and you say, this is one of the places where it's not so focused. You get a much better and broader view. The last thing is you've got a variety of people here. You've got people who are in the financial part of the community. You've got people who are in the creation of new businesses. You've got people like me in the big companies. This is a unique experience, and I really think it's really helping London become a place, a high-tech hub, and accelerating it. And it's all the networking that matters. So fantastic event, and I really appreciate being invited. Thank you, David.
Well, thank you, Bill, for networking with me for the last few minutes, and I wish you all the very best for the rest of the week here at London Tech Week here at TechXLR8. Thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you.
Cheers.